If I'd known I was going to have 2 years to think of a title, I might have come up with something slightly better. But the last 2 years has certainly been a challenge, I think, for everybody within both the laundry and the healthcare sector. Tiny bit about me. I joined the TSA as CEO 3 years ago, if only I'd known. Been on the TSA board of directors for 20 years, so I do know a fair bit about laundry. I actually wake up thinking about laundry. That's how sad I am. Now, every company will have a mission statement. We even found one. I think we've got a vision statement somewhere. They're easy to write, a little bit harder to deliver. I'm not going to read it out on the assumption you can read, but it's quite short. But my job is to try and promote the industry to as many people as possible. Flaw number one. Very roughly what I'm going to sort of talk about today, some stats, just to give you a little bit of information about the laundry industry, the case for reusable, and also, are the bugs really dead? And I like this bit because I think there's some innovative, if I could say it, research we're doing with DMU University. So how am I doing for time? I think I'm still just about 29 on track. So what is a commercial laundry? There's two questions. The problem is most of you will know the answers to this question. And the reason I'm showing this slide, it was 2 years ago, well, last February, not quite 2 years ago, I was walking 4 dogs, I've got 4 dogs, and I had a phone call from quite an important person. He was a consultant for Deloitte. I thought he was important. And he was telling me he runs the PPE procurement hub. So I was getting quite excited about it, thought, okay, try and keep the dogs quiet. And then he asked me, can we process 300,000 gowns? How long could the industry do it? Does it have capacity? This is at a time when 80% of the industry is actually on furlough. So I'm going to come back to that answer in a moment, what I told him. But first of all, just in your head, how many people do you think work in our industry? My flipping answer is about half. But it's actually 24,000 people. It would be 24,000 people if we could employ 24,000 people. We actually have a gap of about 4,000, which is probably similar to some of the healthcare facilities we operate at the moment. The second question, how many pieces do we process a week? And not too complex, it's 50 million pieces a week we would normally process within commercial laundry operations. So my answer to the Deloitte's consultant was about 30 minutes. And he was astounded. He wasn't even aware that there was a commercial laundry sector out there. So that's the bit about, am I doing my job very well? Because they hadn't heard of us. Most people have not heard of commercial laundry. So what does commercial laundry look like? Well, there's 3 areas we operate in: hospitality, workwear, and healthcare. You'll only hear about laundry when it's not there. And I just want, if you think there's no food processing, you can't operate hospitals without laundry, you can't operate the hotel sector without laundry. So if you take it away, the UK economy literally stops. There would have been no vaccine. But we don't really get noticed. We're the invisible service sector. So where are we? Well, we have lots of laundries. They're all over the country. There will be a laundry near you, on the assumption you don't actually work in one. We have over 2,000 lorries on the road. So actually just on logistics alone, we're one of the largest logistics companies in the country, in the top 20. So we're massive. 20% of what we do is logistics. If we look at the healthcare and how it outsources, 90% of hospitals outsource to a commercial laundry. And even the 10%, I've called it in-house, is not really in-house. You outsource to commercial laundry operations. They may be run by the NHS, but they will be commercial laundries. If you go back 30 years, every hospital will have had its own laundry. It would have been on site, but that's changed over the last 30 years. I think Thatcher, was she around then, had something to do with it, with the tendering process. Tiny bit on what a laundry looks like. I'm going to go fairly quick here because I'm conscious some of you see it every day. If we look at hospitality laundries, they process lots of sheets, flat linen. They're quite big. This is actually washing machines. A large washing machine could process 100 kilos every 2 minutes. So that's quite a high volume. This is a 15-ton-a-day laundry, but there are up to 70-ton-a-day laundries in the UK. So you can get an idea of the scale. That's an ironing machine. It's where we iron the sheets. You'll process about 1,000 sheets an hour, 5,000 pillowcases an hour. Maybe. Workwear, obviously it's different. You process garments through a workwear laundry. Certainly around 1,000 garments an hour would be a normal operating rate. Through to sorting systems, we'll use technology to track the garments. PPE, not only are we tracking the garment, we may need to be maintaining garments to a certain standard. So a little bit more on a healthcare laundry, and it's actually a hybrid of the two. They're not dramatically different. Structurally, they will be different. They will probably have clean room areas, foul work areas, and soiled areas. So they may have a different infrastructure. They may have air flows that change, water flows. So there will be different regulations on the infrastructure of laundry, but when you get inside it, there may be slight differences to validation processes, but it won't be dramatically different. Product is obviously different, and the sorting systems, instead of garments, we're probably doing patient gowns or scrubs. Does then change when you get into the surgical areas where you're surgically packing for drapes. And then if you're getting into surgical gowns or processing, you may have clean room, well, you will have clean room areas. And then you've got the autoclaving operations where you're sterilizing the product. But overall, most of what you do, you're trying to produce white linen, clean, on time, stain-free, and that's about 95% of what a healthcare laundry does. I think I'm still just about on track. I haven't got a clue, actually. I've just put them in because I thought they looked good. Right, what I want to talk about is the case for reusables, and it's never been a better time to talk about laundry. We are already circular. So as an industry, we pick up a sheet, we wash it 100 times if it's not nicked or lost, and that's the problem. What do we do with it at the end of life? But before I talk about the end of life, I just want to touch on some of the sustainability areas we are working on, and I will go fairly quick around this graph. Energy. I mean, I'm getting phone calls every day about the cost of energy, mainly from my wife, because I won't let her put the boiler on. Feels tight, but we're back to burning wood, which I'm not sure is good either. But anyway, that's what we're doing. Energy is massive, and I've got Shaiju sat at the front. We're doing a lot of work on looking at what the next energy solution is going to be. Is it going to be hydrogen? Is it going to be electricity? Is it going to be a hybrid solution? Because when you build a laundry, you build it for the next 30 years. And the government really should be telling us what is the energy policy going forward so we can tell our membership. Building designs, BREEAM, there's various building qualities out there. We want to see solar going onto the buildings, but along with the rest of industry. And I've just signed something about rates where we get a discount if we put solar on the roof or whatever. Shaiju persuaded me it was good. Water quality, what we're doing with it, and I'm going to link that into microfibers. Logistics, I mentioned we have 2,000 lorries on the road. Can we move into electric vehicles? Microfibers, there's going to be downstream, literally downstream legislation on this. It's already happening in Europe and America. And we think we can be part of the solution, commercial laundries, where we can actually put in either filtration, but ideally maybe we're looking at an enzyme process where we can actually dissolve the microfibers. Or we can look at electrolysis, which I'm going to sort of dissolve them as well. But I'm a bit new. I've just found out you're a professor, Alistair, so, right, bollocks. Anyway, you get I'm not on that sort of stuff. I know, right, you can definitely dissolve them. That's the right terminology. So I want to come back to recycling, because I've talked about we wash it 100 times. What happens at the end of its useful life? And I'm not sure the terminology is... I'm a bit nervous about when we're sort of at healthcare, end of life or end of primary use, which most people refer to me. If you can imagine that pile, what happens to it? It's got a hole in it, it's worn out, but it's a big pile of used healthcare products. At the moment, it will go to the ragman, so it'd actually be chopped up. We feel we're doing our recycling bit, but it's actually going to be chopped into rags, being used in a garage, and then goes into landfill or incineration. Sort of rough idea around the volumes. The commercial laundry sector buys about 7,000 tons of linens, garments a year. So in theory, 7,000 tons of waste is generated because every sort of, at the end of 2 years, you're scrapping it. So it's a big volume. There's part of a challenge. We don't actually get the 7,000 tons to the ragman at the moment because some of it disappears, but the potential is there. And we've spent quite a lot of time working out why is it not going into a recycling process? And we think the missing piece of the jigsaw is if you're a small laundry or a hotel or a hospital, you never get enough to send it through to the ragman. So it's easier just to bin it or recycle it. And most of it probably goes out with the waste. So we launched it at our conference last week. We're creating a warehouse where we aggregate all that stock. So it'll come from the laundry into the centralized warehouse. We're putting a logistics platform in place. And then the warehouse will aggregate it into the right classifications to then be sent onto technology solutions. And who are these technology solutions? Well, 3 years ago, if I just take Sodra on the left, they were asking for about 100 tons of recyclable product a year. They're now asking for 4,000. So 3 years ago, these solutions weren't there. And they're based in Sweden. They're part of the paper industry, where they take cellulosic pulp. We can inject the scrap linen into that, and it comes out, well, it doesn't come out as yarn, but it comes out as a pulp that is then spun back into a yarn. So it's called fibre-to-fibre technology. And there's a range of different technologies out there. Plan B, the one on the left, is actually 100% polyester. They only want 100% polyester product, and they don't melt it, actually. I think it's a physical process they go through. They create PET that is then spun back into polyester. So if we look at the number of gowns out there, then there's a real potential to make that back into gowns again by taking the PET. We can then, and we've just done it with the hotel sector, add in hospitals as part of the logistical. So you could have hospitals supplying into laundries, supplying into the hub, and then back out to the technology providers. So next thing I just want to talk about for 30 seconds on is what is the next fibre of the future? At the moment, we hear a lot about polyester and cotton. Cotton is actually getting very negative publicity at the moment. It takes 15,000 litres of water to grow 1 kilo of cotton, and then you've got all the pesticides and fertilisers to go with it. You're hearing a lot more about bamboo coming onto the market. Recycled cotton would like to start injecting in. Wood cellulosics, we think, are part of the solution. And all these things are combined, but there's certainly going to be a change in fabrics as we move forward. There's also a role for polyester, although clearly it's got some negative connotations. But if you design polyester to be recycled, you would get up to 500 washes out of it, pending you don't put the bits like the membranes and the fluorocarbon finishes on that then can't be recycled. So it's about designing it to be recycled and maybe increasing the weight a little bit. So I think there's a big conversation to be had around that. And I just want to touch on, I'm conscious that the room probably isn't the right people totally, but I want to talk about the case for reusable. And we produced this document way back in March last year at the request of NHSI to talk through why they were buying millions and millions and millions of single-use gowns. And we were trying to present the case that actually maybe there's another way. And there's already a reusable gown solution. It's already being used. So I just want to touch through the case for reusable. If you take a gown, the difference between a reusable gown and a multi-use gown is, reusable and single use is very little. They look virtually identical and they serve the same purpose. If a disposable gown can only be used as either surgical or isolation. So it's one or the other because it has to be sterilised as you make it. It can only be worn once, and then it has to go for incineration as clinical waste. If you take the reusable side on the right, it can be either processed as surgical or processed as isolation. There is quite a lot of differences if you process it as a surgical gown around sterilisation, but the actual makeup of the gown is very similar. It can be processed up to 70 times, worn 70 times over and over again. It can then be relaundered through a certified process, and then at the end of life, it can be recycled. So we just sort of think it's logical that you would go reusable. Partly, I'm paid to say that as well. But if we then look at just the flow, so you get a little bit more of an idea of how it works, that's an isolation gown. And you'll have seen them, and I know the yellow ones have been part of an NHSI trial. The only difference between isolation and surgical is actually you do the autoclaving and the bagging. So the main difference is the sterilisation at the end of the process. We got asked by NHSI and the Cabinet Office to do a carbon footprint study on reusable versus single use. And we picked up the various disposable, reusable, UK manufacture or offshore. And I don't expect you to read these slides, so I'm going to go really quick because I've got a summary at the end. But basically, you've got disposable versus UK made in and Asia. You've then got reusable versus disposable, reusable versus disposable. So don't try and read them because you won't. Then, and this is, we annualised it. So you've got all these different methods of making a single-use gown or a multi-use gown. We then took what the government told us they were buying, which was 460,000 gowns, not buying, using a day at the peak of the pandemic. We then annualised that, and I hope I spelled annualised right. I've been known to get it wrong, and produced a carbon footprint for both UK manufacture and offshore manufacture. And I'll go on to the summary now. And you can see total on reusable 29,000 versus disposable 350. And then if you take Asia, 37 versus 639 because of the travel. So if you put that into a sort of something I could understand, it's massive. And it's just so logical. We just don't understand why people haven't gone with it. So you've got the red is the carbon footprint, and the green is if you buy UK and reusable. So we just sort of don't get it. It might be because they've got about 10 million stuck in warehouses, on the single-use solution. We are making some progress as an industry. We just want to accelerate that because it seems so obvious. And we've got all the data we can provide anybody who's interested or has no friends. Right, still on track, I think. Are the bugs really there? A bit more exciting about this one. And this is research we've done with DMU University. And there was a now Professor Katie Laird. Do you know her? No, okay. Been a nice link. Anyway, you don't know her, so it's irrelevant. Professor Katie Laird, and she's done loads of research on nurses' uniforms, and sort of phoned me when I took on the role. Said, David, we really do need to talk to you about some problems around verifying, validating wash processes. Well, luckily, I've got some quite clever people around me, and Shaiju sat at the front. He's fairly clever. Let's not overbuild it. He is quite clever. I'm not, so I needed to put it into really simple language. And this is going to be simple language, even though it might go over, well, you'll get it, hopefully. Take a nurse's uniform, and how do we know whether it's being processed correctly? How do we know whether it's actually hygienically clean? Well, the current method is you get a swatch, you put a load of bugs on it, you put it into a washing machine, and here we're putting 25, and you can get different types of bugs, into a washing machine, fill it with water, agitate it, and let the wash do its job. Now, at the end of that, in theory, that swatch is now clean. So the nurse's uniform, from a testing angle, is now clean. However, there's still 25 bugs because you've actually not killed them, you've dispersed them. And the problem gets bigger because there's lots of other test methodologies out there. And you can pretty much pick a test methodology to give you the results you want. If you then add in temperature, different thermal disinfection, chemical, and ozone, you're starting to build quite a big picture. If you then put on top of that you've got industrial processes, OPLs, it's getting messy. So we wanted to look at, can we come up with a simpler method? And even the current guidance is unclear. For a nurse's uniform, it says you should outsource to a commercial laundry, but you can wash it at home if you want. So by definition, that isn't there. And even the European standards or the SEN standards or ISO standards can't agree on the validation process. They will just say you must go through a due diligence process. And if I just look, if I was a bug, I'd want to live in the UK at the moment and probably not in Germany, or maybe Sweden would be all right. I might just about survive there. And those are all to perform the same standard to the same operations, the different thermal disinfection standards throughout Europe. Now, I'm not clever enough, but I don't get why Germany needs 90 degrees and we need 71. We can do 3 minutes, but Sweden, 70 degrees for 10. So you've got massive inconsistency there. So what we wanting to come up with was a single consistent test methodology that we all agree on. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. Let's go out there, see what works well, and can we all agree on it? And then we can contrast and compare like-for-like results. They're either dead or they're not. So we gave DMU University the brief, and it was to come up with a single test method by looking at all the existing test methodologies that are out there. So the solution, and it's already out there, the solution, it's just not universally used, is to basically do exactly the same as we did before, but here we put a little line around it, and that's basically put it in a tea bag. Shide, you told me I should say a semi-permeable membrane. Then you go through exactly the same process. So you literally wash it, bang it in the water, agitate it. Bugs, some will die, some won't die. I'm going... Sorry. So there, you've now killed 5 are still living. So you've got a log kill now, but at least we're all talking the same language. So you can now say, is that a satisfactory result? We're not saying what the result should be, that's for others, but there is now a consistent test method to say, are the bugs really dead? And there's probably better language than that as well. What does it mean? Well, the outcomes on quality is that we all talk the same language, and that's been the key driver here. It opens the door to certify low temperature and chemical processes. At the moment, you can only, within the HTM 104, yeah, good, first time I got that right, it's temperature validation. That's the method you operate. It also enables us to start to have a conversation about spores where temperature may not be adequate to kill. It may need the addition of chemistry as well, whereas we don't have that within the guidance at the moment. It can also impact on sustainability. Low temperature washing can make a massive difference to the amount of energy you put into a washing machine. If we can wash and kill at 50 degrees instead of 71 degrees, there's a 70% reduction in energy you use on that 20-degree differential. If you can wash at lower temperatures, you can extend the life of product as well. Certainly polyester doesn't like high temperatures, you start to get a cracking. So it's a win-win if we can lower the wash temperatures, both for the environment and the longevity of product. So we think it's a really useful piece of research, and we hope, I'm probably slightly in front of the wheel because we haven't finished writing it yet, but when it goes for a peer review, it takes about a year to get it fully, nodding. But we can pay to have it done, which always feels a bit wrong. But we can accelerate the process. But we're hoping to have it published as a document, well, we're saying by Christmas, but it'll be longer than that. So that's sort of me done. I just want to put 4 bullets up to conclude. If I get invited back, and I have to say I don't normally get invited back, these are the 4 things I would want to sort of revisit. For the industry to agree on one test methodology method for disinfection, get the methodology adopted into standards legislation, persuade the government to use, and I say the government, maybe NHS Trust, to use reusable gowns or other products where it is applicable, and create a textile recycling solution for the healthcare sector.